Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much to join us on this webinar that is dedicated to COVID-19 and changes for learning and teaching in higher education. This webinar is organized by the European University Association. We have many registrations from all over the world. I would like to thank you once again for your interest in this. I first would like to start by saying that this webinar is being recorded. And after the webinar, you will receive a link by email with the link to the recording on the EUA YouTube channel. I will start by first introducing myself, perhaps. My name is Thérèse Zhang, and I'm the Deputy Director for Higher Education Policy Unit at EUA. And I will now also introduce you my three speakers. Our first speakers will be Cornelia Freitag, who's the Vice President for Education, for Learning and Teaching, and also for International Affairs at the Ruhr-University Bochum in Germany. We have a second speaker, who's Manuel Jimenez Morales, who's a Commissioner for Education and Communication Project at Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona in Spain. And we have a third speaker, who's Wyn Morgan, the Vice President for Learning and Teaching at the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom in the UK. So welcome to the three of you. I think for now it's actually the two of you, but Wyn will join us very soon, hopefully. I also would like to just take 1 minute to thank my colleagues who are here with me, but you cannot see them. They are doing everything from the back end. It's Luisa Bonescu from the Higher Education Policy Unit at EUA as well, whom several of you might know because she's also working on learning and teaching activities at EUA. And also my colleague Aurélie Clenet, who's from EUA's Communication Unit and who's also watching over us. So to make everything right, technically speaking. All right, so before starting by giving the floor to our speakers, I just would like to introduce you to a few technicalities as well for this webinar. So the first one is that we will use an interaction tool. It's Mentimeter. I think several of you might know it. So we will do a test right now. If you could go to Menti.com. Yes, this is the link you see on the slide on your screens, and use the code that is written there, so 994574, and normally you should access our event. And here you will see that Luisa already put a nice introductory ice-breaking question for you. So if you could also answer it. I will do it right now on my own phone as well. It's basically, we're trying to know what are the profiles that we are having here in this webinar. If you are institutional leadership, rector, vice rector, dean, etc. If you're a teaching staff member, a teacher, if you're a student, if you're administrative and technical staff member, or other. Of course, we are aware that you might be several things at the same time. Just choose the one that reflects your primary position if you can. So I'm just leaving a few seconds for everybody to try to answer. And then normally we should have an overview of who is our audience at the webinar. If Luisa could display the slide. Yes. So, actually, it's quite balanced. We have many people who said they are administrative and technical staff, but we also have institutional leadership and teaching staff strong position. We have 7 students, welcome to them. And we also have a high number of colleagues who define themselves as other. I actually also define myself as other, as I have no other definition for myself. Yeah, all right. I think that provides a quite good idea also to keep in mind, perhaps also for our presenters in terms of who's listening to this webinar. So thank you very much. So we will use Mentimeter for some little survey questions from time to time, but more importantly, Luisa will now change the slide. So you will see the interface on your smartphone changing. We will use Mentimeter for the questions as well. All right, so we have here a chat box. It's the chat box where everybody is saying hello to everybody, which is very nice. But the chat box, we will just keep it for technical questions. So in case something bugs, or in case you cannot hear, or the sound has an issue, or things like that. And we will let you ask your questions on Mentimeter. So through menti.com, you can type your question, and then the option that is there with Mentimeter is that you can like the other questions, so that we can see also what are the most popular questions, let's say. All right, so this was the technical part that took some time. Sorry for that. Luisa, if you could put back on Mentimeter the slide, ask your questions, and then I think we can start with the presentations. So as you know, this webinar is dedicated to the topic changes in learning and teaching in these COVID-19 times. And what we tried to address here is how universities across Europe have been adapting their ways for teaching and interacting. We know that universities mostly switched to online mode, sometimes overnight, in a kind of emergency remote teaching way. And this webinar, we also try to address a little bit the challenges you felt you were having, and also try to come up with some reflection on the future. All right, so I think we will start with our first presenter, who's Cornelia Freitag. And she will present how the situation was at her university, what were the challenges, and also how they managed to cope with this situation. Cornelia, the floor is yours.
Wow. Thank you very much. Hello to everybody. Very nice talking to you. I come from a pretty big university, and I would like to say a few words about my university, which you can see on the slide here in autumn, actually. Now, it's a young university. It was opened in 1965, and it's situated in a post-industrial region in Germany. It's the most populated, most densely populated area in Germany, and probably the whole of Europe. Today, we are one of Germany's 10 biggest universities. We are research intensive, we are a comprehensive university, so we have a little bit of everything. We have 20 faculties, 43,000 students, 5,900 of them international. We have 5,800 employees, that is, teachers. And we have a strong focus on non-traditional students' success. So the region was mining and steel, where we come from. So a lot of, many of the daughters and sons of the steel workers and miners first entered the university in the beginning. In 2017, we started a big digitization strategy and a university program to fund digitization for the faculties who all have already their own digitization strategy. And I think that really helped us when suddenly in the March of this year, Corona hit. And on one day in March, suddenly we had to lock down the university, had to cancel all oral and written examinations and everything that was happening there. We were actually between semesters, which was a good thing. And we immediately established a task force for teaching, chaired by me with people from quality management, learning and teaching center, IT services, and the head of student affairs. And we have been meeting daily and by now, every week, to try and bring people together and help people with the situation. A week later, we published practical guidelines for the comprehensive implementation of digital teaching, because as I say, we were before the coming summer semester. And what is also good to know is that in Germany, all schools decided, universities decided that it would be possible to start later. So the semester did not start as planned on the 6th of April, but it started only on the 29th of April. So that gave us all in all 5 weeks to prepare and to move online. So on the 20th of April, the semester started, and we moved 90% of all our offers to online offers. A week later or 2 weeks later, oral examinations and written tests returned to campus. And since the middle of May, also what we call practical classes, this is work in laboratories, and other things that you can do only on campus returned. But the occupation of the rooms is 1 to 10, so a 100 square meter room houses 10 people, disinfection, list of names, and all the rest. And we are in the middle of preparing a hybrid winter semester. So how did this work at our institution? What were the success factors? I would say the biggest success factors were actually the lecturers, because they were very engaged, they were very creative, and they were very open after the first shock subsided to try out and experiment with new ways of teaching, that is digital teaching. And we had the basis that I already mentioned, namely that there were some experiences from the digitization strategy, that we did have the digitization university program, and we do have a fabulous learning and teaching center, which really helped. And we hired students, we already had student assistants who would go to the teachers in this program and help them digitize their offers. So that was strengthened and spread. Another factor that was really helping was that we had a very close coordination of the leading actors. And I already said that we had this task force, which has a very close link to the crisis management team. I communicated with the deans of study constantly through email, through Zoom. And we also had a good tie to the communication unit of our university. I think what is most important, still most important, is swift and clear decision-making concerning the switch to e-teaching. So we decided basically on day one that we need Zoom now, and we acquired it. We bought additional servers, and we started a support program for teachers with kids teaching from home, so that they could get money to employ student assistants to help them teach. We also, in the framework of the legal decisions that our federal county made, we made sure that everything that was allowed to return to campus came back to campus. Also, by the way, the libraries are not completely open, but there is library service through Windows. Another thing is that we very early and constantly updated internal and external communication, which is really, really important. The faculty had very strong support on all matters. We already conducted a first questionnaire after 5 weeks of teaching, and we asked the teachers, how experienced are you in using digital technology in recent semesters? And you can see that only 7% said they were very experienced, 16% that they had good experience. And you can see that we had a very not well experienced group of teachers, but the question, how are you coping with the implementation of your digital teaching so far, gives a completely different picture, because the high majority of our teachers felt after 5 weeks of teaching that they were doing fine, one problem, and I cannot give you this whole questionnaire, but one problem was obviously the people who had kids at home. So it was not about technical matters, but it was more about how to organize teaching if you have a toddler and a young school child. Some students also started to conduct questionnaires, and here is one from my own department. So there were 202 students participating. That's not a really big group, but still you can see that they most answered that they felt okay with the semester, and quite a large number said it was good or very good for them. And the high majority felt, that's the green and the light green part, that they felt that their lecturer did a very good job. And so again, we feel that shows that we were on the right track. What have been the main achievements and challenges so far? I already said 90% of all courses planned for the summer semester went online, and by now, because all the laboratory work has returned, we are near 100%, so that is good. A majority of teachers and students have accepted the challenge very positively. The digital competence of teachers and students is constantly growing. We have now much better technical infrastructure, but we are, of course, also fighting with a number of challenges. I already said the leaders are well informed on all levels, yet the trickle down takes very long. And the questionnaire, for instance, showed us that not all the offers that we have were available, or not everybody knew about them, which was disappointing. Working conditions at home, I already said that this is a little problematic for everybody with little kids or other care responsibilities. Technical infrastructure is a constant burden. We have a very frail infrastructure, and we had a hacker attack. And our infrastructure hasn't recovered completely yet. Plus, and that's the last I want to mention, we have basically weekly changing legal regulations in my federal country, and there are inconsistent regulations across the German federal states, and that does not make the things easier. So far from me, I think that was the last slide. Thank you. That's true. Yes.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. Thank you. If you could also mute yourself, that would be great for the echo. Very interesting to see how you indeed organize this. I will pass the floor immediately to Manel, and I would like to remind to all those who said they had sound issues. First of all, I hope it's solved. Secondly, please use Chrome or Firefox as browsers, because for some mysterious reasons, apparently it doesn't work well with Explorer. So this being said, I will pass the floor to Manel. Manel? The video is taking minutes. Yes, Manel, the floor is yours. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here with you. I hope everybody is safe and keeps healthy above all. And I'm speaking on behalf of Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, which is a young public university. I would say a middle-sized university. It has 14,000 undergraduate students and 20,000 students in total. We have 8 departments: law, political sciences, humanities, economy, engineering, biomedical sciences, languages, and communications. I'm a teacher in the communication department myself. And this is the only university in Spain working by quarters. So it means that when we went to the lockdown, we were exactly in the middle point of changing from one quarter to the other one. But the problem is we were just starting the exams, the assessment from the winter quarter, and we had to pass to the spring quarter. So it made us to think in a double strategy, a strategy to implement all the processes to have an online assessment immediate, because the very first day of the lockdown was the very first day of the exams, and then immediately after, 2 weeks after, start with a new term, with new teachers, new subjects, etc. So we actually defined this strategy into 4 boxes. The first one was the organization of the university. We established an emergency team. It was a team from the government of the university, which tried to be the link between the government in Catalonia and Spain, with the specific instructions we had from them, and the link to the departments. In the department, we had specific units working on the implementation of these new modalities of teaching and learning, and we work with service providers to try to optimize what we offered before in the university. Then we had a communication strategy in several lines, an institutional communication line, which we reinforced with rectors' messages, the manager, etc. But we specifically worked with different targets, because we understood that the different needs of some specific students, undergraduate, graduate, several programs, the administrative staff, the teachers needed different information. So we worked on that as well. And we finally opened several channels of informal communication related with the COVID and the pandemic situation. Among them, I would quote the one we call at UPF, We Don't Stop, which was an informal communication line to share practices, experiences, ideas about how to deal with the teaching courses from the point of view of the teachers, but also from the point of view of students. And at the same time, the administrative staff could contribute with other ideas to that. Third box, special services. More than new services, we tried to offer supplementary provisions to these services. We have this Center for Learning and Teaching Innovation, which I directed since this year. So from this center, we offered training for teachers, ideas, advice, technological support, etc. We offered also supplementary ICT services. We also offered the possibility of having computers at home, sending computers at home for these students or people from workers from the university who needed it, and again, administrative support for the whole community. And finally, we established a teaching and learning policy with some recommendations and guidelines, with teaching training, as I said, and a strategy of development support for specialty teachers, but also the rest of the staff. During all this period, we had the chance to test something that we were really curious, I would say, before. We have this educational model called Evolution. Evolution is a program to introduce some innovative ways of teaching and learning in our university, more adapted to the new requirements of the society and the working sector, the industrial network, thinking of personalizing the teaching and learning activities, having these synergies with public and private institutions, focusing on the student as a co-creator of content, etc. So we understood it was this situation was an opportunity for us to try to intensify the adaptation to this evolution program in our university. So we deduced from this situation that we had to imagine new teaching and learning paradigms. So we tried to unlearn what we had learned before, and we can reconsider space and time as unique learning units to understand that time and space as we had them before, like you go to the classroom, you are listening to a teacher for 2 hours, had to be breaking as units and think of other paradigms. We explored other teaching formats. Actually, we had a plan for digitalization of the materials and the lectures. We tried to optimize the learning experience through technological tools. So we put at first place the methodology, and then for us the tools were like a complement for us. We tried to personalize the acquisition of knowledge from the students, trying to define several layers of acquiring this knowledge, depending on the interests of the students, the pace, the rhythm of learning. We try to maximize the use of open materials, sharing materials among teachers, trying to think that the subjects were not just let's say that the subject was not attributed to just the teacher, but also to several of them, and asking the students to be co-creators. We have an experience here that I think it's quite telling about that. It is the Diari de Barcelona. Diari de Barcelona is Barcelona newspaper. The Barcelona newspaper was a newspaper created in the 18th century, and this year the university acquired the rights to publish this newspaper. But we had to launch it in April, so finally we did it. It's not an academic newspaper; it's a normal newspaper for the whole society. And our students from the Department of Journalism, but also other departments, did that, and it works. Every day we have an issue, and we understood they could be co-creators of all this material. And I'm finishing with this last slide, explaining that we work on 5 pillars, reconsidering master classes. These units of time and space for us now are different. We regroup the subjects in teaching teams. We tried to put the student at the center of the learning program, making the learning more personalized, more diverse, and we implemented a mentoring program for them, an intensive mentoring program. And we wrote these guidelines for the teachers about some measures of contingency, teaching digitalization, multimedia production. We try to transfer the face-to-face load for teachers to online load, and mentoring and assessment guides. And that's all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thank you. I think we will go without further delay to Win, who's our last presenter. The time is running awfully quick, so we will have a third presentation, and then we will start taking the questions. And I see that there are already so many in the Mentimeter box. So thanks to all of you who already put questions. Don't forget to like those that are already there, so that I can see by order of priority which ones to take. And Win, I think the floor is yours. I'm muting myself. Hello.
Okay, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and just reflecting on changes since all this began. I look at the photograph that was my profile for the speakers, and I recognize A, it's a long time since I've worn a suit, and B, I am desperate need of a haircut. So I apologize for the state of my appearance today, but I will be brief on this because I think many of the points I will make cover what Manel and Cornelia have said anyway, so I'll keep this fairly brief. So I'm at the University of Sheffield in the UK. Like Cornelia, this is a steel city, post-industrial, 29,000 students, over postgraduate and undergraduate. So a big institution, and we pivoted, as they say, overnight. And I'll just get this to move. There we go. So what did we do? Well, I think what was most important, how did it happen? We did it with clear direction from the senior management. Everything was predicated on health and safety. All the decisions and all the processes that we undertook started with what was right and what was healthy and safe. And that's an important underpinning principle. We pivoted to online provision for all our courses, and that required a very strong central direction, which is not normally how we operate. But it also required us to shift our Easter break. We have very odd terms and semesters in the UK, and we were halfway through our teaching term. And what we had to do was pull Easter forward, so that allowed us a chance to actually get things ready for a continuation of teaching some 4 weeks later. So that gave us a breather, if you like, and gave us a chance to reflect on what we needed to do. Everything we did was coordinated by an incident management team, and there was a particular learning and teaching operations strand within that, very much down to the detail of how we do this, how we get online, how we support students, how we continue to operate and produce, as we all want to do, a high quality experience for our students. Now, much of that was based around the support systems and processes we already had, but we created very quickly a sense of what do we need to do in the digital space. And really what this meant was drawing together all the expertise we had, because there was expertise in the institution around fully online delivery, but we wanted to make sure that we could draw on that and use that to help to share that knowledge with others, and to show that this wasn't just being thrown out to individual academics and departments to try and understand what they needed to do. I think what's really important is a bit like Manel was saying there in terms of their strategy, was how did we think about our teaching in getting online? And I think it's fair to say what we were doing was just trying to get online. We were not asking colleagues to design online learning within 2 or 3 weeks. That just isn't possible. But what we did want them to do was to retain the same learning outcomes that were in place when the virus struck, and indeed when the modules and programs began. We didn't want to move away from those learning outcomes. We wanted to maintain the rest of the term. We didn't want to truncate it, so it was still across the same period of 5 weeks. I think the crucial area for change was actually around assessment, because much of our assessment is quite traditional in that it's unseen written exams in exam halls. So to shift to an online open book exam was quite a challenge for all of us, and I include myself in that, because I still teach a final year module with 130 students, and thinking about the assessment was actually the hardest part of the process, rather than the delivery and the engagement with the students per se. And I think the final bit I want to emphasize was that there was a lot of anxiety amongst the student body about how this would affect their assessments and their outcomes. And what we created, therefore, was a safety net for the students to protect what they had so far in terms of their achievements, so that the outcomes of this next semester wouldn't necessarily undermine that. That's something that we've seen across lots of institutions in the UK. We're not unique in that, but it's quite a difficult process to engineer for a whole institution, and that works across every programme. So what did we find challenging? Well, not surprisingly, like as we've heard already from Cornelia and Manel, overcoming some of the fears, if you like, and reluctance to engage in digital that we've seen over a number of years, where not everybody is comfortable in this space. And by that, I mean mostly the academic colleagues, not necessarily the students, although we can't assume that all students are happy and comfortable in this space. Doing this at scale across the whole set of programs, undergraduate and postgraduate, is quite difficult as well, and trying to support colleagues across 43 departments is quite a substantial task. We wanted to ensure as much as we could some consistency in approach, and indeed the student experience, which again is quite a challenge in 4 weeks. I think one of the things we did find was access for students to the hardware and software and to spaces to study, because the students were spread across the world. I mean, some of the sessions I had spread from China through to Mexico City when I was online, and that's quite a time difference. if not an access to software and hardware issue as well. And indeed, do our university systems work remotely as well as we would like to think they do? And I think amongst that, of course, is security. Cornelia talked about the hacking. We haven't had that, but of course we have had concerns about softwares being brought in very short term to try and support students, but all sorts of issues around GDPR and data and so forth. The outcomes, we got everything online by the 20th of July. There was a huge increase in the use of digital tools. I mean, we use Blackboard, but Blackboard Collaborate, use of that went through the roof. And there's been a huge engagement with different ways of delivering relatively standard teaching in some cases. The student feedback so far, and it's anecdotal, I admit, we are now surveying our students, but it's been very positive. And certainly from my perspective as a teacher, it's been quite an engaging process, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, despite the pressure and the stress in the short term. But it's fair to say that it's not been absolutely consistent, and I think the extent of engagement, I think, has probably varied from department to department and indeed individual to individual. But that's not surprising given the pace at which we moved and what we were asking of colleagues. So there's a lot that we want to learn from in what we've done here. There's a lot that we don't want to lose. And I think one of the things that we are working on is that this is not a blip and that we move back to where we were. It's how do we take this on and use this learning to actually shape our programs for the future. So that was a real whistle-stop tour, but I'll stop there, Teresa.
Thank you very much, Wynne, for your presentation. I think we had here three very complementary, but also sometimes contrasted input, and very rich, at least if I judge by the questions you have, because I already have to apologize that we probably won't be able to take all the questions. I would like to kindly ask the three presenters to enable their videos, not their microphone yet, but just the videos, so that we can perhaps also see them on the screen. And we are awfully late, of course, on the schedule, but we will try nevertheless to take a few good questions. And we had a few really good questions. And the first one here, and this is really for the three speakers, and we will perhaps go in the order that we had. So Cornelia first, and then Manal, and then Wynne. The first group of questions is about how to keep students motivated. How do you keep your students motivated? And I think this also relates to something I think Wynne or Manal said, which relates to autonomous learning. And it was probably a huge opportunity, yet also challenge, to try to see here what's the state of play in for students in autonomously learn, and also the other side of the story is how do you keep your teachers engaged? So how do you manage communication with your teachers? I have somebody who put a question here saying, one of the challenges we face is to maintain the social link between students and between teachers and students. What particular strategies have been put in place within your institutions? And also a bit further, somebody else said, it's difficult to see what kind of flow of communication the teachers need. Some of them would feel that they would like to receive a lot, and some others would feel deterred by long emails. So the question of student motivation and the question of how to maintain this, how to keep basically the whole community engaged and also engaged with each other. Cornelia first, would you like to say something?
Yeah, these are really big questions, and let me start by the fact that because we were in between semesters, one of the biggest questions that was discussed in Germany was, would we start teaching again, and what kind of semester, and should the students enroll? So one thing was to address the students, so I wrote an open letter and it was sent to all students, which was a lot of pressure, I must say, knowing that thousands of people would be reading this letter, and telling them that we would do everything to teach them, that we would move online and try to move as much online as possible. And I basically invited the students, and I think they took us up on this, to feel that this is a special semester and we should learn from each other, because both sides were not experts in what we were doing, neither the learning nor the teaching. And I think we can still say that we, at the moment, if you look at the teachers, we are doing a lot of online teaching, but we haven't caught on to really facilitate online learning. So this move from online teaching to online learning still needs to be made for most of the colleagues. On the other hand, what we did, and I saw that this was also part of the strategies that both Win and Manuel mentioned, is that we created a web page with different scenarios, what to do for teaching. And so the teachers could go there and could look, and it was open, also the student could go there and look. And so it was like an ABC of how do I become digital in my teaching. And we added also advice on how to connect with the students and what are the different ways to connect with the students and what kind of person you need to be to connect differently. And because with so many students and so many teachers, there are different types and there is no one size fits all. So with that said, I think maybe someone else is going to pick up.
Yes, thank you, Cornelia. Manel, would you like to add something? Yes, you certainly will,
well, actually,
because you're a professor in communication, moreover, so please go ahead.
But in fact, I think Cornelia was perfect, and she did a very good point, saying that there's no formula to communicate with the students and try to establish contact with them to keep them engaged. In order to answer the first question about how to keep students motivated, I would say there are 3 points I would like to underline. I think we need to make them responsible of their own learning project. So we need to put them really into the center of the learning process, make them to be the main, assume the main role, the protagonism of that. This would be the first one. The second one would be allowing them to be flexible in this process and allowing us to be flexible as teachers. And the third one is understanding that all this situation is also a challenge for the students, and it's a challenge to overcome. So this is motivating usually for them, for the majority. They want to overcome and to improve themselves. So about the flow of communication, I totally agree with Cornelia. I think the flow has to be more constant. Everyone has to establish the way to communicate with the students and find the frequency, the way to do that, the channel, etc. And I would say it's a good thing to try to intensify the mentoring role of the teachers. Sometimes we speak about that, but we don't practice it very much. So in this case, I think it's more relevant than in other occasions. Thank you.
All right, Win, would you like to comment on this as well?
Yeah, just very briefly. Nothing that would disagree with what's just been said. I think one of the key things for us was anxiety amongst the student body and trying to keep students calm, I guess, more than anything else. And I think that was a key first part of our communication concerns. But then I think it was more about what came from the university, i.e. me, to make that simple but not too often. But then to make sure that the connection was with the program, with the department, and to make it very much more local and personal. And I think that's how we try to drive our communications. I mean, the interesting thing for me was I asked my students when they were engaging with the online lectures that I'd recorded, pre-recorded, and I asked them whether they did this as and when, or did they do it in the timetable slot that they originally would have had the lecture, and it varied. And I think that's a really interesting thing, that students do take responsibility for their own learning. Some would do everything, all their lectures in one go, Others would actually use the timetable that they were working to, and then actually look at the lectures online at those slots. So it's quite interesting how they engage with it. So again, you can't assume that there is an homogeneous response to what you're going to do. So therefore, the communication has to be clear but not restrictive.
Thank you very much. When there was an echo when you were talking, so if I could just ask to those who are not speaking to perhaps mute their microphones. Those things happen. It happens every time, but we just try to minimize the effect. All right, we have a bit more than, well, we have more or less a quarter an hour left, but we might also prolong by a few minutes if needed. And I would like now with our three speakers to go into what's there for the future. So basically what will happen, and perhaps we could first start by talking about the immediate future. So the next semester, basically what will happen next autumn. Perhaps we can kickstart this conversation with one of the questions that is already there in the Mentimeter. What does a hybrid winter semester mean, both online and offline? So kind of blended as the new standard in a way. And then, of course, the question that many people actually ask: how do we deal with classes that are practice-based, lab-based, etc.? And then a second sub-question, what do you do with your international students? What's happening with the international students? Are you still taking them? Are you offering them an alternative offer? Will they be able to come physically, under what conditions, etc.? I will start in the other order, perhaps. So Win, if you would like to take the floor first.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
muting myself.
Okay, so the blend is, I suspect, going to be very, very common across institutions, and that really is reflecting that through social distancing, whatever that will be by the time we get to the autumn, there will still be, certainly in the UK, restrictions on how we will be able to operate, and that really constrains what you can do in the face-to-face environment. So the volume of face-to-face activity is going to be limited. So we need to think, therefore, about how do we make the most of those interactions? How do we ensure that they are really, really good, really interactive and really supportive of the students and their learning, but not then just to throw everything else online. And I think that's the danger, is that you focus so much on one little bit, you forget the quality and how you can arrange activities online, because we've got more time this time to actually design the learning as opposed to just getting it online. And that, for me, I think is the really big challenge. So a bit like Manuel was saying, focus on what the student outcomes are, focus on the student experience, and then design the activities and how you're going to do it accordingly. So that, for me, is the blend. In terms of the practical classes and lab-based, that's a real challenge. I mean, there are, some online virtual labs and so forth, but as you get through degree programs, the engagement has to be richer and has to be more complex, and that becomes much more difficult. So that is our biggest challenge around engineering and science, and indeed performance. If we think about the arts, that the performance space and solos and so forth, that's more challenging as well. And then international students, absolutely, we want to be open to international students. We, of course, in the UK now have a quarantine process. So there is 14 days of quarantine if anybody comes in. Whether that's still being placed in the autumn, we don't know, but we have to plan for that. We want to do everything we can to say we're open, and that's our approach. And hopefully their willingness will be matched by their ability to travel, because they might want to come, but they might not be able to for all sorts of government policy reasons. But we're definitely open for international students.
I'm muting myself. Thank you very much. Manel, would you like to comment as well?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty much as Win explained in our university. We defined a protocol with two different scenarios. The first one is the one we would like to develop for the next term, which is the blended learning scenario. So allowing our students to go to the campuses and have this face-to-face experience. We are a face-to-face university, and we would like the students to get the most of this possibility of going to campuses and relate among them with the teachers, etc., etc. And the other scenario is a virtual one, completely virtual one, as the one we have had during this lockdown. For the blended learning scenario, we are considering three elements. The one related to the infrastructure, how to occupy the spaces, how to work with the movements of the students around the campuses, etc., how to divide the groups, especially when you have a group of more than 100 students, for example. The second point is the methodology. We understand that we need a different, completely different methodology if we have this blended learning way to deliver the lectures. Obviously, the face-to-face lectures have to be linked with the activities online, and that's sometimes the most the most complicated challenge, I think. And then the use of technology. We had an experience with the LMS, which worked quite well, but it completely changes when you need other ways to supply what you did in the face-to-face courses by this LMS. So everything changes, and the use of the technology is different. About the labs, about the practical thing, as Win said, it's difficult when you work with performance. For example, myself, I'm a teacher of communication, as I said, and I'm teaching in a TV studio with actors, with cameras, etc. It's very difficult for me, but it's difficult also for laboratories in the biomedical sciences. So we suggest using simulators in some cases, but obviously the simulators can't provide everything. We have defined protocols for all these laboratories, trying to work with small groups. And then we understand that there are several practices that we can do other way, like the one I mentioned about the newspaper. It doesn't work with everything, but we try to adjust to the situation. About the international students, the same as when described, we allow international students to come, obviously with all the health advices, but also we offer some virtual courses for them and a virtual plan in case they want to stay in their country and follow our lectures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Manuel Cornelia, would you like to add a comment?
Yes, I mean, much has been said, and the strategies are comparable. I already said that we started basically after a week with presenting to our lecturers and teachers 4 strategies how to do online teaching, which went from asynchronous to synchronous and different ways. And so this is still there, and we are trying to refine this. And as I say, it's a perfect web page that was built up and is still updated. And so we're still working on this. With regard to the next semester, I'm just proofreading a 14-page paper about what to do, and we came up also with a couple of scenarios, and the most important 2 scenarios which we are after are in fact a scenario that would continue what we are doing at the moment, because I already said that we already put lab work back on campus, but it's terribly restricted, 10 square meters for a person. So you can imagine how long it takes to take groups through this. And we are expecting first-year students in big groups. And it's especially the first-year students that we care a lot about, and we want them to get more on-campus experience than we know we are able to give to the rest of the students. we are, I just talked yesterday, day before yesterday, I talked to the deans of students, and we know that unfortunately lots of things will have to continue online because we do not have the space, because we also assume that we still have to use safety spaces. We do hope, I mean, with 10 square meters, it will not be doable. We already know this, 43,000 students. You can just make the math. But if it's a better relation, we want that every first-year student will get a couple of hours on campus. And we also want, for the big cohorts, we want that they might get an extra class or something that is specifically designed for them on campus to get this experience. Yeah, I think everything else has been said. And international students, if they can come, they should come. They are welcome, but they have to know. And I think, again, it's the same in every other university. They have to undergo the same things in online and on-site teaching as everybody else. So it will be a different semester, and everybody has to prepare for this. But we will be better prepared. And we can be better prepared because we have a little more time. And that is something that makes me more optimistic. If we could do it once, now we can make it more qualified. And we also get this feedback from students who feel that because they are stuck at home with their lectures, they invest more time. And there is more talking about the lectures and the courses among the students. And so there's also something within the situation where you can't go out and can't meet a zillion friends and go to bars and do other things that makes you more focused. And what we try to do is really to encourage students to really feel that this learning experience at the university online at the moment, and then also a little bit offline, is very valuable. And they are not losing this semester, but they are gaining, like we all do.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. We are already 3 minutes from the end, but I think we will prolong a little bit by a few minutes if all my speakers at least agree, if they don't have to run, yeah. So I will take a last round of questions on basically the longer term future and also lessons learned from that crisis. First of all, on the technical side, many people are asking for certificates of attendance. After this webinar, you will receive an email. There will be a link. You just click on it and you can download it. All right. So I think that will be quite straightforward. So the last part of our conversation, we could perhaps dedicate it to impact on the longer term, let's say, on learning and teaching, because of course right now we are reacting in an emergency situation, but what would you like to change in learning and teaching when back to normal, and what actually would your new normal look like for learning and teaching? What are the lessons that you would like to maintain in the future? I have a question here in Mentimeter that says more or less the same. What change have you had to reflect and evaluate the impact of changes, and what time will be given to this? Some changes have had unintentional positive impacts, and they should be captured. So if you could say a few words, each of you, first on what were the positive, unintended perhaps, but positive impact, and what you would like to retain. Manel already mentioned, for example, that you had that model, that this was also like an opportunity to work based on this. Can I start with Cornelia this time again, or with Manel, whomever is ready? Yeah, Cornelia, yeah.
Yeah, I think I already on my transparencies listed a couple of things that are well retaining. And I think one thing that was strengthened was communication between the colleagues, between the teachers, and giving and taking advice about teaching methods. So normally you do it for yourself and you're an experienced teacher, but now so many people were new teachers. And so among the faculty, this exchange about what works and what works better and what could you do if, is something that I would like to retain, and I think it's definitely worth retaining. Because we don't have enough time, I'll just
Thank you. Manel?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think we learned a lot from this experience, and sometimes we talk about opportunity. I actually use this word, and some teachers, especially teachers, more than the administrative staff, say, oh, come on, this is not an opportunity. We are suffering the consequences of that, so we can't think that everything is positive about that. And I'm not saying that. I don't want to banalize about the situation, but I really think there are some opportunities and some learnings we have to pick out, to pick up. I think the impact of the long term can be conceptualized in 4 or 5 points. I think we understand what does it mean open source materials. We had this concept. We had the idea of open source, and we had the idea of open knowledge. But now this concept of open knowledge is it's been put in place in a very effective way, and I think it's a learning we have to pick up. Then we have talked many times about the change of the role of the teacher, putting the student at the center and adopting a different role, trying to not repeat all the content we can have in other sources, but also, on the contrary, doing something with an extra value with the students. And I think this situation epitomizes this need of change of the role, because we couldn't be in front of the students through the camera and trying to reproduce what the students could find through other ways. I also think that the technology emerged as a very useful complement to the lectures, to the courses, to try to give this personal path of learning to the students. This way they can go deeper into some contents, try to find their own interest, try to also assess themselves with several tools, etc. And I think finally that everything, that the whole situation helps us to think of other paradigms. If we try to transfer literally what we did into in face-to-face courses to virtual courses, it doesn't work. If you try to say, okay, I'm going to talk during 2 hours to the students through the camera, it doesn't work. But if we imagine other ways to teach, we discover there are other valuable formats. And I think that's the principal learning. I think that's the main learning of that. There are other ways to transfer knowledge, and there are other ways to acquire knowledge. So I would like to keep this idea for the future.
All right, I will leave the last word to Win. It was already so rich that I felt I will need to summarize a bit at the end as well. I will leave the last word to Win, and then I think we will need to wrap up this webinar, although I could have continued with you, all of you, a couple more minutes, but I think we will need to wrap up after that. Win?
Okay, I think rather than repeat, I think there's just one thing that really strikes me is how lucky we are to work in universities, and that collective endeavour that has really come through is just extraordinary. My college has just been utterly brilliant in focusing on this, and I'm sure that's the case everywhere else. That's been remarkable. I think the learning for us is, or the opportunities for us is, thinking about what we offer for students. You know, what is the art of the possible? The portfolio could change as a consequence of this, reflecting students in very different backgrounds, very different needs, part-time, flexible, all those sorts of things that traditionally have been seen as more difficult to do in a face-to-face environment, campus-based environment. I think that's a real opportunity for us. The other thing that for me is a real learning is how agile institutions can be when they have to be. And at times universities can be really quite sluggish. And I think we've demonstrated we don't have to be. And I think that's a really big learning for me. So I will finish on that positive.
Yeah, that's very true. I think we can all finish on that positive. It was a very good word for the end. Yeah, so yeah, I think we had really good food for thought for the future as well. This reflectivity on one's own teaching, and also the experimentation, really experimenting what open source means, and experimenting also perhaps a bit further, a bit differently, the student-centered learning paradigm is are quite positive lessons, I guess, we can all retain from this crisis situation. All right, it's 3, and I see that many people are apologizing in the chat that they have to leave. So I will close this webinar. I would like to thank you once again so much. Thank you, the 3 presenters who were there to share their experiences. I think they were found very valuable. I would like to say I'm so sorry to all the attendants who put questions in Mentimeter, and I think I was only able to take not even a quarter of them, and there were so many interesting questions as well. I would like to say once again that each of the participants who registered will receive a follow-up email very soon with the link to the recording, and also to the presentations, and also to this certificate of attendance. So you can also circulate this to your colleagues. Some of you already asked in the chat box if you could circulate material to your colleagues who were not able to be there. Of course, please feel free to do so. Thank you so very much to the 3 of you once again. And I think we nowadays always finish something by saying, take care of you, take care of yourself, and also of all the others around you. I think we have here the next webinar announced. So the next EUA webinar will be a webinar organized by EUA, the Council of Doctoral Education of EUA. And this will be on the Thursday, 25th of June. It will be on disciplines and interdisciplinary in doctoral education. So if you would like to join that one, there's also additional information on the EUA website. All right, we'll leave each other here, I think. Bye-bye.